Welcome to the 26th Annual Watershed Environmental Poetry Festival. And I'm Joyce Jenkins from Poetry Flash in Berkeley, and we have 6 events for you in the Watershed Festival this weekend. In the chat box, you'll find a link to the Watershed page on poetryflash.org, where you can see the entire schedule and see this year's gorgeous poem broadside, Awake, by Linda Hogan, pressure printed by book artist Lisa Rappaport, with real leaves and grasses. It's a real beauty and a gorgeous poem. We felt we needed a little softness in our environmental approach, a little comfort and love this year. And I'd like to thank Pegasus Bookstore in Berkeley. They have provided us with a link to the Watershed Bookshop. It's our online store with where you can purchase books by authors that we're having all weekend. bookshop.org/shop/watershed. I'd also like to thank our community partner, the Ecology Center Berkeley Farmers Market, and our supporters, the Berkeley Civic Arts Program, Alameda County Arts Commission, and California Arts Council, and our individual donors. You are appreciated. Tonight, we celebrate the poems and ideas in California Fire and Water, a Climate Crisis Anthology. We all realize that poems can't by themselves cool the earth or lower sea levels or take plastic out of the ocean, but poems can open our eyes, paint us a picture, inspire us to love our earth and respect her and listen to her. As poets, this is what we can offer, and this anthology does the job. What an amazing, exciting anthology project. It's crucially important. Here is Molly Fisk, editor of California Fire and Water, a Climate Crisis Anthology, to tell us more about this crucial project. Molly?
Unmuting myself and showing you this beautiful cover, which is, when you edit a book, and in my case, I also published it, you get to do all this great stuff like find people to help. And I saw this photograph. I'd seen it for years. It was taken about 4 years before I did the book. And I got a hold of the man, and he said, the photographer, who comes from just south of Yosemite. And he said, well, it sounds like a very good project. What do you want to pay me? And I said, $75. And he said, sold. So it's a wonderful thing. This book was a project that I thought up in the grocery store parking lot of my small town in the foothills. When I discovered that there was a new grant, this was the first year of a grant for Poets Laureate. And they had mentioned that all the different places you could be a Poet Laureate of. This is the Academy of American Poets, and they're now into their 3rd year of doing it. So it's really been a successful and a wonderful project. But they mentioned all these different places, cities, towns, states, Puerto Rico, Guam, every place. And they forgot to mention counties. And so me being a county poet laureate for Nevada County, California, I had to write them an email and say, ahem, we are not chopped liver. And they immediately changed and included counties. And then that made me, of course, feel that I ought to send something in because they've been so nice as to respond that quickly. So I was in the parking lot of the grocery store and I thought, well, if I were going to do this, what would I do? And I live about 50 miles as the crow flies from where the campfire had just taken out Paradise, California. A lot of people had died. A lot of people had moved because they had to move somewhere into my area. So, and our fairgrounds, for instance, was housing all kinds of animals, both domestic and agricultural, like farm animals. So I was affected a lot by it, and I kept thinking about having taught kids in California Poets in the Schools. And mostly when I taught there, I taught at juvenile hall. And I was, standing there next to my car thinking, there are kids out there who are really in trouble because of this. And I would like to think of some way to help. And I know that writing poems can help. And I knew we had already established in the state California Poets in the Schools for years and years that was up and running and smart and capable. So I thought, what if I could get some money and send more teachers out to talk exclusively about writing about the trauma that people have gone through, not just with fire, but with all kinds of different climate disasters. And then, as I knew from having worked with California Poets in the Schools, at the end of every year, you make a little anthology, or I did a collection for a high school poetry contest for California Poets in the Schools. So it made sense to me to teach some kids, as many kids as we could. And it turned out to be about 800. And then to make an anthology of the poems. And I thought probably it would sell better if there were some grown-up poems in there too. So we put all ages in there. I think the oldest person is 84. And then I had planned to have readings all over the state in April of 2020. And we all know what happened that month. We stayed home. It's been really interesting to reread it year after year and to talk to the people. I arranged to, because I had published it myself, I arranged to make more copies than I needed for the contributors, and I started giving them away to schools and to libraries, public libraries, and to prison libraries. And I've gotten enormous amounts of feedback on it because people are so reluctant at the beginning when they see it. They're like, oh dear, I don't want to be depressed, and uh-oh, I know how bad this is already. Or they're not from California. There are lots of people who've read it who are outside the state and they have no idea what it's like. They see the news clip and then it's over. One of the things people say all the time is these poems made me feel as though I understood it better. I understood what it was like to be in these circumstances. It really was helpful. So I'm delighted that it's had that effect. I'm delighted that it still has legs, as they like to say. We're not done with having climate crisis and we're not done with having forest fires. The season has become 11 and a half months long. So I think it's something that's worth remembering and helping other people remember that writing can help people process the damage that's going on. If I had a lot of money, I would try to get on a plane in a couple of months and go to Ukraine and see if I could help teach poetry to people there, which I'm sure all of them are already doing. That's a country full of poets. Anyway, it's kind of my story. There are 114 people in here. 32 of them are school children and the rest are adults. There are a couple multi-language poems in Spanish and in English. I tried to get a very broad geographical and every other possible groups of marginalized people involved. So it's widely representative. I did get yelled at by someone who said there weren't enough men in the anthology. And I apologized. And at the same time, I thought, well, how do you like it, buddy? Just very privately to myself. So you're going to hear two poems, maybe someone's reading three, I can't remember. Each of these poets who follows is going to read their own poem from the book, and then one of the student poems, and then they'll read some of their own work, just so you get a sense of the whole poet. We want you to remember as you hear these poems that there's a big subject out there, but we want you to hear the individual voices very clearly also. And I'm going to quote you from the dedication epilogue. What are these things called? Not epilogue, epigraph. I put 2 lines of writing into the beginning of the book. And one is from Brenda Hillman. From one of her poems says, sorry, it's ash. Sorry, it's smoke all the way down. And then another from Greta Thunberg, who says, I want you to act. I want you to act as if the house is on fire, because it is. And that I want you to remember. It's hard to forget, but I want you to remember. So we're going to start with Lisa Alvarez. For 30 years, Lisa has taught writing and literature at a California community college, and her most recent credit is editing Why to These Rocks, 50 years of poems from the community of writers. Lisa.
Thank you, Molly. Thank you so much. And thank you, Joyce, Poetry Flash, Watershed, and all of you here tonight with us, wherever you are. I'm speaking today from the beautiful foothills of Orange County, down south, the unceded lands of the Hashiman and Tongva peoples. I can see Juan Flores Peak right outside my window. In the years that I've lived here in Majeska Canyon, I have seen that peak burn twice, most recently in the fall of 2020. And this morning when I hiked it with my teenager, it was covered with poppies, all bright and opening up. Resilience and recovery, may we have more of it. I'll be sharing 5 short poems today, and I'll begin with a poem from the anthology. Angelique Lopez wrote this when she was a 3rd grader at Flowery Elementary School in Sonoma, under the guidance of one of those teachers that Molly mentioned, one of those wonderful California poet in the school teachers. I just want to remind you all that when you're in 3rd grade, because it might have been some time for all of us, you're 8 or 9 years old, perhaps the age that some of us, I know me, first started writing poetry. Flowery Elementary School is a bilingual cross-cultural school in a region of our state where it is now fire season year-round. No doubt Angelique, during these last few years, so many of us learned to look at the ridge and read the smoke there, right? And no doubt she memorized, like some of us do, the names of the fires that threatened her home. Nunn, Tubbs, Kincaid, Walbridge, Glass. As CAL FIRE notes on its website, fire is a reoccurring phenomena now in Sonoma County. Here is Angelique's poem from the book. If you're reading along in our hymnal here, it's page 104, right? It is aptly titled Wildfire. Breathe in my house burning, mi casa quemándose. Breathe out my birthday party, mi fiesta de cumpleaños. Breathe in my friends dying, mis amigos muriéndose. Breathe out a new house, nueva casa. Breathing in losing electricity, perdiendo electricidad. Breathe out food, comida. Breathe in losing your room, perdiendo mi cuarto. Breathe out a new friend, nuevo amigo. Breathe in no food, no comida. Breathe out, I met my grandpa, conoce a mi abuelo. Breathe, losing my family, perdiendo mi familia. Breathe out my school, mi escuela. Angelique Lopez, 3rd grade, Sonoma. In the years since the fires came and never left, many of us have perfected our strategies for survival, unfortunately. This brief poem of mine captures my learning curve. It's called Evacuation Chant. Pack less. Leave sooner. Go further. Stay longer. That's my advice to all of you when the sirens come. Go sooner, pack less, go further, stay longer. My own poem in the anthology is accompanied by a beautiful translation by Luis Antonio Pichardo, who's the director of DSTL Arts, a nonprofit community arts organization up in LA. I just want to say that Luis's translation of my poem improved it. I think it's better in Spanish, so I encourage you to read the Spanish version. I'll be offering you my my original in English, dry and crispy, ready to burn and cry. It is called Drought Sonnet. While waiting for the river to rise from its dry sleep, some stacked stone cairns taller than their children in its dusty bed. Great field lupin blue in the parched margins where the river once met the alpine lake. That fall, acorns dropped early, impatient, angry visitors knocking on roofs, white fibrous hearts splintered underfoot, no blackberries, no apples. Great oaks dropped branches on dreaming children below. Her brother died in the last wet year, drowned face down on the riverbank, where, as children, they launched fleets of bark boats with sails of dry leaves. My next poem is also by that alpine lake in the High Sierra, and I think its site will be familiar to a handful of folks in the room. It's called Previous Trees. The Jeffrey pines rise like arrows shot from the ground. On the corner of a patchy court, a new house rises. Rolls of green sod wait like fresh, wet pelts of the earth itself. It takes 2 days for the chainsaws to chew 3 old pines. Their sharp resin stings like warm Retsina, so far from Greece, its ruins, its own vanished Arcadian pines. The hired men from Mexico plant 2 more in their place. The previous trees obscured the mountain view that the unseen man from Silicon Valley paid for. And thank you. I'm going to close tonight, or at least my part of tonight, with a poem that appears in a collection called More Revolutionary Letters, a tribute to Diane de Prima. De Prima was one of the poets we lost during the pandemic, though not to COVID. And I was thinking of her this week as I put together these poems. And I was also thinking of our old friend Al Young, who I know through the years was such a part of this poetry festival and all we did in California. Al, a dear friend, poet laureate of the state. It's coming up a year now since we lost him. I still feel him everywhere though, right? This poem is a cento, crafted with lines from De Prima's Revolutionary Letters. And its title is Revolutionary Letters 1 through 36 in Anarchist Chinto. The epigraph is also from Diane de Prima, because why not? So many wonderful lines, right? Revolutionary Letters, 1 through 36 in Anarchist Chinto, epigraph. So that the stars can look down on the earth and not be ashamed of us. The stakes are ourselves. Get up, make a habit, plant seeds. You may be called upon to practice at any time to die. It will take all of us. And no one owns the land. This continent is seed across fields of insecticide and migrant workers, subtle hieroglyphs of oracle. Put back the buffalo. Are you prepared to do it? For our children's children, we will have to. We'll have to give up something. It's a good idea. You can have what you ask for, so ask for everything. No black cloud, fear, or guilt. Can you? Do you care to be a spectator on this scene where there are no spectators? Have you thought about the American Aborigines whom you can summon in your neighborhood? Does the end justify the means? How much can we afford to lose before we win? While the sun goes down on this fabled and holy land, no exile where we will not hear, welcome home. Remember, they buy out all the leaders. Better, we should all have homemade flutes, simply the acts of song. The more we give up, the more we will be blessed. Put metal back in the earth, or at least not take it out anymore. The peace we seek was never seen before. Stand clear. Thank you so much. I look forward to hearing all the other poems to come. Back to you, Molly.
Thank you, Lisa. That was wonderful. And thank you, Diane de Prima, wherever you are. Our next reader is Lee Herrick. His latest book is Scar and Flower.
Thank you, Molly. And thank you for having me and for your vision and for putting together this remarkable anthology and for bringing us together tonight. And Lisa, that was wonderful. Thank you. And of course, to the inimitable Joyce Jenkins and Poetry Flash, thank you for 26 years of pretty incredible work, not just with this festival, but Poetry Flash and everything else. Good grief. And thank you, Rosalinda, for your help tonight as well. Oh, and Molly, I like the gender balance of the TOC here, table of contents. My heart's with Ukraine. I'm just going to read 3 poems. One, the first one is from Soha Kim. She's a 3rd grader at Spreckles Elementary in San Diego County. This is her poem from the anthology. It's titled Tree Ghosts Are Crying on Their Dead Bodies. Fumes from factories and cars choke the air. Achoo, achoo. Animals run away. Away fly the birds. The water is rising, rising to my knees. Really? Oh my God, I see pools of oil, mounds of trash, dead fish floating in the hot ocean. Oh my God, everywhere, carbon dioxide, no flowers. What is happening? The clock says 2050. As I read that poem, it just occurred to me, I don't know if the anthology brought out the intelligence and compassion and awareness in these kids, or if they already had it, or it's a combination of both. But I think it is a testament to teachers and schools and what poetry can do, and especially the young people in our state. Molly asked me about this poem, the poem I'm going to read that I contributed to the anthology. It's a poem from my first book, which was published in 2007. And it's not explicitly about wildfires per se. And I was thinking about how I might briefly introduce this, because it starts off with the person lighting a match. And all I can say is that it makes me think of how water and fire both take on different qualities, their own life. I mean, water can purify or terrify. Fire can cleanse and obviously destroy. So nonetheless, this is my poem from the anthology. It's titled How to Spend a Birthday. Light a match. Watch the blue part flare like a shocked piñata from the beating into the sky. Watch how fast thin wood burns and turns toward the skin, the olive orange skin of your thumb, and let it burn too. Light a fire, drown out the singing cats. Let the drunken mariachis blaze their way, streaking like crazed hyenas over a brown hill, just underneath a perfect birthday moon. And the last poem I'm going to read is a newer poem. It appears on Boone, California online. And I hope this is not a stretch. This is really a food poem. And maybe this is what a good book does, Molly's anthology. It makes me think of nearly everything in terms of the environment. And it's really my love poem for food trucks and street food. And, you know, there's not all the cars waiting in line, burning the gas and all the other things. So I really wanted to read this tonight. It's called Abecedarian Love Song for Street Food. And it has an epigraph from Anthony Bourdain, who said, "Street food, I believe, is the salvation of the human race. All praise for the pozole glistening in midday light by the grace of the woman near the comal." In Southern California, Raul Martinez unveiled a mobile downtown gold mine of al pastor by a bar in East LA for the drunk, the artists, the necessary future waiting in line. Praise be to the ice cream truck, glory of the van's slow roll. So praise the van, hut, cart, booth, tent, stall, stand, bike, or truck. I once devoured a tlayuda in Oaxaca City, broke down just as the sunlight burst through the heart of a woman kissing her baby's forehead by the plaza. When I say love, what I mean to say is, I dream of you through disaster, malady, drought, or this nightmare anxiety pandemic. Now, even in this late dying, let us praise the 20,000 open-hearted vendors in Bangkok and the glorious pupusas in San Salvador I ate on a bench near a dove. Quesadilla, arepa, dupoki, hallelujah. The banh mi right on the outskirts of Hue, the chili pepper, the cilantro songs, praise the Zocalo saints who brought me to tears with a taco so full of music I almost wept. Under the Beijing moonlight, baozi is made by angels, vendors with wings if you know where to look. On West 53rd and 6th Avenue, New York City, halal, or in Fresno, No xenophobe is welcome. Tell me what to eat. Your chuan, your elote, your mouthful of pure zen, like savory, surprising flashes of heaven. Thank you.
That was gorgeous. And I haven't had supper yet. Thank you so much, Lee. Our next reader is going to be Devi Laskar. She's the author of the award-winning novel, The Atlas of Reds and Blues. Her second novel, Circa, will be published in May.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you again, Joyce, for putting together the Poetry Flash for all these years and making it such an invaluable resource. And thank you to my dear friend Molly, without whom I would not be a poet. And so I really, really appreciate your love and invitation. So today I am actually the person who's reading 2 student poems alongside my own. I am the one who's reading the 3. So the first one I'm going to read is by Muad Belkalfia. And at the time that the anthology was published, he was a 4th grader in Oakland at Cleveland Elementary School. It's called But Now to Fire. Once I was the mist in the clouds. I was the one drop of rain. But now I am the storm. But now to fire. But now to smoke. And I love this poem so much because it was short, but also it packed such a punch. And so I'm really excited that I got to read it. And the second student poem that I wanted to read is, I am told, a perennial favorite here amongst us poets. It is the one by Sophie Lee. And if you would like to follow along, it is on page 103 or 104. It is actually on page 104. And Sophie Lee, at the time of 2020, was a 5th grader at West Portal Elementary School in San Francisco. And she has a very popular poem in this anthology called Secrets. The glistening white moon taught me how to sleep at night. The golden sun taught the world to rise during the bumpy dawn. The shaking forest has secrets to tell you. You are strong. Don't give up. You can make it through. Isn't that gorgeous? Also short, but packing quite a punch. It's really, really excited. Wish I could read all of them out loud. Well, I have, but and then my poem today, for those of you who'd like to follow along, is on page 102. I actually wrote this poem, I believe, in a poetry boot camp with Molly many, many moons ago, and way before this anthology came about. Here I go. Ars Poetica with Red Riding Hood. Suppose she moves to the edge of the forest, spends her time staring into the eyes of night from the window. Suppose she was raised to be unafraid of hunger and loneliness, well-heeled wolves. Suppose it's a symbolic journey, that little girl from the red hood confronting the demon. Suppose the moral arc of that story points back to the paying audience waiting to be entertained. The girl outwits the wolf and saves the grandmother, right? Suppose the girl is charmed by the cloak she wears, its bloody color, a bullfighter's flag, beckoning, or cheap travel-size lipstick from the convenience store. Suppose the distance between the ordinary world and the denouement could be measured by a lie detector. Suppose the girl is not a girl. Suppose she too is a wolf. Suppose she is a lot older than the storyteller pretends her to be. Then it's another Persephone and Hades story, I suppose. We all know what happens next. 5 red seeds causing the invention of perennial winter. The wolf swallows the grandmother whole before the girl rescues her, right? No one ever mentions the crops burning, how the girl in red is the match setting the world and its old-fashioned ways alight, how it won't stop, this burning, until trees and fields reduce to charcoal, until the blinding smoke lifts, a new landscape is drawn. Thanks. Thank you. And I'm just going to read one poem that I thought was a bookend to Muad's poem. I wrote this a while ago, but I thought it would work. Nimbus, day 14,039. The shape of seraphs, but ash-colored, reclining on their rounded bellies, arms outstretched, trumpets at their lips, their music silent, low to the ground, chubby toes skimming the spires of pines, billowing shadows like umbrellas, a gaggle riding the April breeze, blocking the puny sun with their fat heads. None of the other pedestrians take notice of the heavens, how the curls unravel now at the ears, tendrils at the temples sheared, spiraling into shards, their bodies blossoming into a simple rain. That's it for me. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Devi. That was lovely. Now we're going to hear from Denise Low, a former Kansas Poet Laureate. She's a member of the Indigenous Native Poets Board and now lives in Healdsburg, California. Hi, Denise.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you, Molly, thank you, Joyce, and Poetry Flash Watershed. I really look forward to coming to this in person next year. I'm lucky to have a beautiful poem to read by Lynn Ewan in The Wise at the end of the book. She's a third grader at was a third grader at Francis Scott Key Elementary School in San Francisco. The poem is Ember of the Sun. I am the basket made of bear grass in the northern lights. I am the bowl made of spruce roots at night. I am the orange fire that burns through the maple forest. I am the forest of tricks. I am the beads made of the embers of the sun. Just remarkable poem, and if that's third grade, I'd like to see fifth grade. This is my poem from the book Wildfire Spread, and I want to say I have a different relationship to fire, perhaps because in Kansas we use fire to burn brush out of the pasture. So every spring we smell beautiful sweetgrass smoke blowing in from the west right after the thaws, and it's always done carefully when just as the ground is thawing, it's still damp, and once in a while a grass fire will get out of hand, but seldom. So when I had a friend who was working at Harbin Springs and lost so much in the Valley Fire in 2015 that those of us in Kansas who'd been buddies of him and his wife did a fundraiser and helped him relocate and his wife relocate to Ashland. So, and then I had another friend, I had visited Paradise, and then I moved out here And then there's the Kincaid fire and so forth. So even though I know there are problems with the fire, I also understand how it has been used to to work with the land as well. Wildfire spread. A branching power line sparks the transfer station fire. It jolts backfeed boxes to Santa Rosa. They shut off the geysers above Dry Creek Valley, here fading chortle of generators. Arid gullies spider the slopes. Dried juniper leaves swirl ready to fire flammable pines. Overhead, red helicopters loop, pouring water on grass tinder. Smoke billows in dust devil whirls. This poem is more recent. I have a book out from Red Mountain Press called Wing. And this is the first poem because I kind of think it pulls together my experience with Indigenous powwows and also living here in Sonoma County and what that's like. This moment of danger, Wallbridge Fire 2020. Crows on pavement hop sideways, one-footed like the powwow dance crow hop, but zigzag. In the half-light, feathers shine taffeta black, smoke from burning redwoods muddle sight. Masked strangers walk by us, not threatening, but shielding from an invisible plague born on breath. Lungs quiver inside our chests, thudding a two-step song of murmurs. Tsuno Mountain sits wordless as haze circles its ridgeline of pines and live oaks. Morning sun barely remembers to return to this moon valley of vineyards and goats. Months ago, I crowded into a bar to hear a band sing La Calle Está a Fuego, a song for dancing crows and me. Fuego, fuego, fire, fire, streets aflame, danger and beauty. From that same fire season, the day the sky turned orange. A Godzilla blast sunrise adds fuel to the horizon's full throttle flames. Underfoot, buried fault lines quiver. We breathe shallow, choked breaths. Recriminations are too late. Volcanoes lie dormant, but might roar to life. Our mountain, a cinder cone, might explode one night while we sleep. Stranger things have happened. A forest disintegrates in a floating flotsam around us, falling, and tomorrow ash will crumble into another screenshot of this monster show. Weather changes. The arrow of time flies one unbroken span. And I'd like to finish with a poem dedicated to William Wandazan, a Yuki poet, whom I knew when he came through Kansas to visit. And he had me out to read when he was teaching at Occidental. He died in 1992, and my husband and I were fortunate to be friends with him in his last years. I donated a broadside he had given to me to the Sequoia National Research Center in Little Rock. And so this begins with the term a fugitive print, which I love that term. I'd like to write fugitive, words. But the fugitive print is a random broadside that it has no other connection to another binding, I guess. So I was at the research center and the library and saw this on this familiar thing that I had on someone else's library table. Ember for William Wandazan, 1947-1992. A fugitive print sits on the table, perforated, detached, untitled. It reads, long ago black bears sang around our lodge fires. Tonight they dance alive in our dreams. This is the half-life we share, William. Sketched maps to Round Valley and my stories of the Neosho and buffalo jumps in the Flint Hills. You set words loose in my ears, words you left in manila folders. Your papers flame in my hands. I see you in the fire's heart, a coral glow image of what you knew, what you dove into. Thank you very much. I look forward to hearing more.
Thank you so much, Denise. These are just, I feel so happy. These are wonderful poems to hear, along with the poems that I know so well. Our next reader is George Yatchisin, the author of The First Night We Thought the World Would End. And he hopes to avoid writing a sequel titled Every Night We Think the World Will End. Recently, he's co-editor of the anthology Big Enough for Words, Poems and Vintage Photographs from California's Central Coast. Thanks, George, for being with us.
Thank you, Molly, for inviting me to be among these brilliant readers tonight. Lisa, Lee, Debbie, Denise, it's just so inspiring to hear your work. Thanks to Joyce Jenkins and Poetry Flash for hosting us, and Rosalinda for being the behind-the-scenes technical support. And if you were wondering, my backdrop is a detail from a painting done by Frank Goad after one of Santa Barbara's many fires. It's a 5.5 by 5.5 painting we have in our house. So the student poem I'm going to read from the anthology is by Alivandra, who was a 9th grader when she wrote this at Nevada Union High School in Grass Valley. And this is called A Letter from Fire. Sorry, I came out of nowhere and destroyed everything. Like a typhoon against a stick house. I was just hungry. My hunger cannot be tamed though. It's like the Yuba River in winter rushing and rising over land, sweeping away anything in its wake. I want to be friends, but everything I touch turns to ash. I tried to warn you as my hunger ran wild. My bright red and orange lit up the sky like a warning siren going off. But still, I was too quick. No warning could ever prepare you for my destruction. The wind tried to knock me down, and the lakes and rivers tried to surround me, but they did not avail. My hunger dismisses them as a slight annoyance in the whole scheme of things and ravages your home, your family. Sorry, I cannot do anything but watch, as if I were a fawn witnessing her mother hit by a car, unable to stop, unable to move. Sorry. So that's Alivandra. Great poem, great voice poem. My poem from the anthology is written during the Thomas fires here in Santa Barbara and so much of Southern California. And oddly, by the end, became really predictive of something we've been through a whole lot since, you'll see. I had my little surprising Nostradamus moment, I guess. It's called Burn After Reading. So it seems fire can be a sort of time travel. What, when wind whipped, it can clip an acre a second, something similar to 150 cars parked in a square in each with a hungry spark tonguing its gas tank. Of course, it's hard to say whether nothing equals past, present, or future, as if smoke signified something as simple as nostalgia, a quick, if sloppy kiss, the hope for romance, for fire reminds us anything can happen before anything does. They tell us at night the ridge of flames will appear closer than it really is. They tell us the wind rides in hell's driver's seat. That's something with a name seductive, with a name like a train, sundowner, may make a blaze roll in with a tsunami of spark. They tell us we could drown in this air, so teach lessons of particulates, the important algebra of the numbering of masks. Sure enough, everyone who dares to walk about does so dressed as if for robbery or surgery. And indeed, something is stolen. Something needs so much to heal. So Yatchisin is done to Ukrainian, actually, and they did such a job with it on Ellis Island that you can't find any other Yatchisins anywhere beyond the part that I know is my family in the United States. There's not a ton of us there. So that got me to thinking about this, and so this is a more recent one. It's called Called On. I guess I didn't really realize only a couple hundred years ago, you didn't need a last name unless they planned to tax or kill you, for soldiering generally meant slaughter. A village got by on a first name basis, if that, nods and grunts and collar pulling and pointing. Europe's map might rage and flap, but a cow was all one needed as long as your pail held milk. Names are only needed for owners. You, try this kohlrabi I just pulled from the good dirt we share. My day job, I'm a staff member at UCSB. So although recently, well, just recently the students came back, but for a long time the students were there, but staff was still meant to go there, which made it a particularly strange place, a big campus with very few people. So this is a poem called Variant. Virus empties the campus under the bright mistake of a quarter midday moon, a dull smudge against all the otherwise blue that, this once is hard to read, is hopeful. Eucalyptus shed their skins yet end up as mottled as before, as if stained from crying. The swim team laps the pool, arms scalpeling, as if to get to the bottom of the water. Lane weather, froth to mostly choppy, and no care at all for forecasts. Santa Barbara is very famous for its mission, and obviously we know the histories behind the missions. They had to deal with water for the mission, so this gets us back to climate crisis 200 years going, maybe in California. This one is, it was all done by hand. For want of water, the fathers put the Chumash neophytes' faith to a laborious test. Miles above the mission, a dam had to be built. If you begin with the Old Testament God, you rarely move past him, stone by heavy stone, hefted 4 men high. A wall to hold not enough rain. Still it stands, 2 centuries on, although the aqueducts are just for show, taking nothing downward to the lavadero in its grizzly bear conduit. History dry as dust. So with what can they today wash paint brown as blood away, the intentional mess of protest? The statue of recently sainted Junipero Serra would look on if it hadn't also been beheaded. I don't know if you remember, they had some serious protests for the mission. You can understand it. For my money, Don't Look Up is kind of a sloppy and not as good satire as it should be. That said, it led me to this poem, so it was good for something. This one's called They Say It's Only a Movie. It's always a bit odd leaving the theater after a movie when the world ends. It's not as if we can't imagine endings, but to have them tower above us leaves us breathless effortlessly, even if a comic cowboy airman whoops his way on a missile down. Or you hold my lucky hand. Let's wait the credits out to give us time to try to become ourselves when the lights come up. Had to get a good end of the world poem into that one. And then this last poem, it's going to be my birthday not this Saturday, but next Saturday. I didn't just write this, but you'll see it's kind of a birthday poem and gets to climate crisis at the end because of course it has to. This is called Accompaniment. Assuming it's not presumptuous to suggest I'll make it to 60, here's the only thing I want. A horn section to toot me about my life. It seems an age worthy of being slathered in soul. I deserve some brassy depth and oomph, blats and blasts, slips, sighs. I care to suffer some swagger in my genially gawky step, me aping favorites from a stare to burn, lots of hands wishing kisses through the artless air. But when the tenor and alto run parallel lines of attack, when the melody barely ekes beyond the trumpet's mute, life might crack open a last time or two. Then, for my 70th, a solemn string quartet. Sure, sometimes violins speed like cars careening, but I imagine more cello sawed with the delicacy of a magician slicing a lady in half only to have her return to a stunned normal and everyone's bored applause. How rich every adios might be with the quartet's adagios accompanying my 7th decade, all of the resonance like crying. If I make it to 80, I'll only need a solo singer, her a cappella song, Dawn and Dusk, for then I will hold the glow of each magic hour as if a cinematographer, as opposed to someone tuneless, examining his cognac for the crystal inside its amber. Her gospel so human I finally have to believe it. On his winged horse we ride. And then at 90, assuming California remains coniferous after scorched summers, take me down to the trees and lay me down on the forest floor. Please be sure my one good ear is against the ground. What won't call to me? What won't be the forgiveness of silence? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Next we have Molly Fisk. Molly's recent book is Naming Your Teeth, Even More Observations from a Working Poet. She was the inaugural Poet Laureate of Nevada County, as she said, and she is the editor of this amazing anthology, this dynamic, exciting anthology. Molly?
Thank you. I just want us all to know, I mean, you know this from having just listened for an hour to these people. One of the most wonderful things about anthologies is we get to hear so many different voices. And even the 6 of us here are so different. Our rhythms are different, our language is different, what we think about is different. And it's just the most valuable thing to have the blend of all of it together. That's just why I loved doing this work, and I would like to do more of them, possibly not all about whatever that subject was we talked about earlier, but it's so valuable to me to have us all here together. This is called My Old House from Marcus Wright. He was in the 6th grade a couple of years ago at James Monroe Elementary in Sonoma County. And it's on page 167 if you're looking at the book. My old house. Come through the dark lane of cold air, like a ghost flowing through your bones. Look around at the huge tree looking down on you. Listen carefully for the sound of sobbing. Walk down the block until you see a park. Run up to the park to see if it's broken. Smell the rain falling in the midnight sky. Touch the rust on the monkey bars. You can make out a human figure of a boy. The boy is sitting on what used to be a crimson swing, looking at a house 10 feet away from the park. Hear the sobbing again, but it sounds close. You can see the boy crying by the shining tears falling down. And that boy misses his old house. And that boy is me. My poem is called Particulate Matter. If all you counted were tires on the cars left in driveways and stranded beside the roads, melted dashboards and taillights, oil pans, window glass, seatbelt clasps, the propane tanks in everyone's yards, though we didn't hear them explode, R13 insulation, paint inside and out, the liquor store's plastic letters in puddled colors below their charred sign, each man-made sole of every shoe in all those closets, the laundromat's washers' round metal doors. But then Arco, Safeway, Walgreens, the library, everything they contained. How many miles of electrical wire and PVC pipe swirling into the once blue sky? How many linoleum acres? Not to mention the valley oaks, the ponderosas, all the wild hearts and all the tame, their bark and leaves and hooves and hair and bones, their final cries, and our neighbors, so many particular, precious, irreplaceable lives that despite ourselves, we're inhaling. This is called My Heart. You'll see that I'm a fan of list poems. And it's after Kim Adenizio, and it's also for Kim Adenizio. My heart, that meadowlark, that traveler, that uncut sapphire in the bucket a Brazilian miner carries on his back out into fading daylight, that intricate knot, that truss, that explanation for failure, that harmonica solo moaning through a bar's open door, that revolving gleam from Alcatraz night after night, that nickel buried in last week's filthy snow piled at the edge of a parking lot, scrim between stage and backdrop, dictionaries next to last page, that breath in the mouth of a baritone, the mouth opening, the first note, a simple equation, a billowing sail, that lace at the edge of a petticoat, that splintered dock by the boathouse where you're cutting your engine, where you're aiming your bow. One of the things that I do in order not to go out of my mind with all the disasters and climate crisis and bad behavior and everything else that's going on around me is to go find places that are beautiful. And sometimes it's looking at a bluebird on the telephone wire right out my bathroom window. And sometimes it's going to a place like this. Singing Canyon Sonnet. I have to say something about the blue grasses by the side of the road, the red rock rising behind them, a lacy kind of scrub juniper, yellow-green in afternoon light, dotted here and there up the broken slope, and walls scraped sheer, the red striated with bars of gold and brown. I have to tell how two greasy ravens, startled from their perch, made a raucous noise in the slot canyon. Their cries bounced upward, magnified by 100, where I had just been singing Amazing Grace, and they had not stirred, the only hymn whose verses I reliably remember. My boots raised puffs of fine red dust behind me, walking back to the car. I should mention that the aspen leaves were anvil-shaped and vivid, that anvil clouds quickly overtook the sun, that before I saw those 37 white-tailed deer, I was feeling incredibly lonely. And I might as well confess how acutely I missed the man I left at home, even though I drove 2,000 miles away from him to figure out which one of us to love. And this last poem is called Phil, Who Loved the Giants. The bra I took off at 4:45 through the sleeve of my dress and put down somewhere. I found on my grandmother's hutch in the kitchen, incongruous, surrounded by jars of jam, yellow plum, blackberry merlot, and a half-finished painting of peonies that don't resemble peonies, more like an enormous hydrangea. I've learned it's very hard to see what you're actually seeing, much less to reproduce it. My paints are asleep in their wheeled cart, 4 canvases gessoed and ready for me to take up a brush, but I haven't. Oh well. Now the sky is almost completely devoid of color, just the last pale grayish peach as sunset slides into home plate for the night, almost the color of this once ecru but washed too often underwear I'm dropping into the trash so I don't turn into my mother, whose underwear got replaced only when it fell off her. Perhaps I shouldn't have mentioned that, but it's a sorry world that revolves on an axis of secrets. I say, spit them out. And for me, who lives for color, that dingy thing had become kind of a nightmare. I used a baseball analogy there in honor of my painting teacher, Phil, who loved the Giants. I'm a Red Sox fan myself. Phil would have said that I could turn 1 hydrangea back into 7 peonies if I felt like trying in under an hour. He was smart that way, knew who to console and who'd respond to a dare. Yesterday, he died. If I could paint him back into life and health, I'd do it. More alizarin crimson in the flesh tones of his face instead of cadmium yellow. We spent a lot of time on flesh, a lot of time on water, the Yuba River's myriad blues, ochre and viridian, granite, shade and sunlight. He told me once to go outside and watch the clouds instead of imagining them. So I did. Blew my mind. A storm was rolling in, green and gold, nearly black, 5 entirely different purples. He was like that. Try it. See for yourself. You have my permission to screw up. Which I echo all the time to younger writers and to the lined face in the mirror that is not my mother's, the one that doesn't need more crimson yet. Please, go wild and make a mess. You will learn so much that's valuable. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Molly, and thank you all for sharing your poems and the poems in this amazing anthology, California Fire and Water, a Climate Crisis Anthology. It is one of the most dynamic and wide-ranging and well-produced anthologies that I've come across in any subject, but it's especially useful. This anthology is so useful to us now as we try to understand what's happening to our world, our earth, our environment, our place, from the macro to the micro. But anyway, I just wanted to remind you really quickly, yes, thank you for holding it up there. I'm managing to hold it up. Anyway, I wanted to tell you to look on our online Watershed bookshop. The link is in the chat box. It's bookshop.org/shop/watershed. It's got great books in it, but particularly this anthology. And do look into getting it. You won't regret it. And I wanted to just remind you that this Watershed Festival is the whole weekend. This is the kickoff event. We have 2 more days of packed with festival events and with explorations, you know, as only poets can do, perhaps, of this topic, this climate crisis that we have in front of us from every single angle. At noon tomorrow, tune in. You will see a memorable conversation along Strawberry Creek in Berkeley, filmed there with Joe Lamb, an arborist, writer, environmental activist, Kirk Lumpkin, poet, many of you know, Chris Olander, poet, also Nevada County Poet Laureate after Molly, and a longtime Watershed organizer, and Ben Gucciardi, who's a wonderful poet, very excellent new book out, and Eco Dance, Under the Trees by Sharon Coleman to the poetry of Allison Hawthorne Deming, and read in Allison's voice. And please check out poetryflash.org for the complete schedule of Watershed. You'll find unexpected treats there, and all the Zoom links and everything you need to know to get into these events, these free events. And I think you're gonna learn something and enjoy it. And maybe that's what we need now, a little comfort to figure out solutions. So we're going to say good night now. Thank you so much. We're going to, after the recording is over, we're going to leave the Zoom on for a few minutes so that we can, if anyone who's here joining us in the audience can ask a question or say hello. So thank you so much.